Chapter 10. The man stealing up to the camp, to give him his due, was as spry and cunning as a fox. He changed his position so swiftly and moved so agilely and quietly that he could have sneaked up on anyone. Anyone, but not Boreas Munn. Boreas Munn had too much experience in the matter of stalking. "Come out, fellow," he called, trying hard to colour his voice with self-assured and confident arrogance. "Those tricks of yours are in vain. I see you. You're over there." One of the megaliths, a ridge of which bristled on the hillside, twitched against the deep blue starry sky. It moved and assumed human form. Boreas turned some meat roasting on a spit, for he could smell burning. He laid his hand on his bow's riser, pretending to be leaning carelessly. "My belongings are meagre." He wove a gruff, metallic thread of warning into his apparently calm tone. "There are a few of them, but I'm attached to them. I shall defend them to the death." "I'm no bandit," said the man who had pretended to be a menhir, in a deep voice. "I'm a pilgrim." The pilgrim was tall and powerfully built, easily measuring 7 feet, and in order to balance him on a weighing scales, Boreas would have bet anything that a weight of at least 25 stone would have been required. His pilgrim's staff, a pole as thick as a cart shaft, looked like a walking cane in his hand. Boreas Munn was indeed amazed how such a huge clodhopper was able to steal up so agilely. He was also somewhat alarmed. His bow, a composite 70-pounder, with which he could down an elk at 4 dozen paces, suddenly seemed a small, fragile child's toy. "I'm a pilgrim," repeated the powerful man. "I mean, any other man?" Boreas interrupted sharply. "Let him come out too." "What other?" stammered the pilgrim, and broke off, seeing a slender silhouette, noiseless as a shadow, emerging from the gloom on the other side. This time Boreas Munn wasn't at all amazed. The other man, his way of moving immediately betrayed it to the tracker's trained eye, was an elf, and it is no disgrace to be sneaked up on by an elf. "I ask for forgiveness," said the elf, in a strangely unelven, slightly husky voice. "I hid from both of you gentlemen, not from evil intentions, but from fear. I turned that spit over." "Indeed," said the pilgrim, leaning on his staff and sniffing audibly. "The meat's cooked more than enough on that side." Boreas turned the spit, sighed and cleared his throat, and sighed again. "Sit ye down, gentlemen," he decided, "and wait. The animal will be done any minute. Verily, he's a fool who denies meat to travellers on the road." The fat dribbled onto the fire with a hiss. The fire flared up. It became brighter. The pilgrim was wearing a felt hat with a broad brim, whose shadow quite effectively covered his face. A turban made from colourful cloth, not covering his face, served as headgear for the elf. When they saw his face in the glare of the campfire, both men, Boreas and the pilgrim, shuddered, but didn't utter so much as a gasp, not even a soft one, at the sight of the face, once, no doubt, elfinly beautiful, now disfigured by a hideous scar running diagonally across his forehead, brow, nose, and cheek to his chin. Boreas Munn cleared his throat and turned the spit again. "This sweet fragrance lured you to my campfire," he stated rather than asked. "Didn't it, gentlemen?" "Indeed." The pilgrim tipped the brim of his hat, and his voice changed a little. "I smelled out the root from far away with all due modesty, but I remained cautious. They were roasting a woman on a campfire I approached 2 days ago." "That's true," confirmed the elf. "I was there the next morning. I saw human bones in the ashes." "The next morning," the pilgrim repeated in a slow, drawling voice, and Boreas would have bet anything that a nasty smile had appeared on the face concealed by the shadow of the hat. "Have you been tracking me in secret for so long, Master Elf?" "Aye." "And what stopped you revealing yourself?" "Good sense." "The Euskadurg Pass." Boreas Munn turned the spit and interrupted the awkward silence. "Is a place that doesn't enjoy the best of reputations. I've also seen bones on campfires, skeletons on stakes, Men hanged from trees. This place is full of the savage followers of cruel cults and creatures just waiting to eat you, according to hearsay."
"It's not hearsay," the elf corrected him. "It's the truth. And the further into the mountains towards the east, the worse it'll be."
"Are you gentlemen also travelling eastwards, beyond Elskadeg, to Zeracania, or perhaps even further to Hackland?" Neither the pilgrim nor the elf replied. Boreas hadn't really expected an answer. Firstly, the question had been indiscreet. Secondly, it had been stupid. From where they were, it was only possible to go back or eastwards, through Elskadeg, where he too was headed. "Roast's ready." Boreas opened a butterfly knife with a deft flourish meant to impress. "Go ahead, gentlemen. Help yourselves." The pilgrim had a cutlass, and the elf a dagger, which also didn't resemble a kitchen knife at all. But all three blades, sharpened for more menacing purposes, served to carve meat that day. For some time, all that could be heard was crunching and munching, and the sizzling of chewed bones thrown into the embers. The pilgrim belched in a dignified manner. "Strange little creature," he said, examining the shoulder blade which he had gnawed clean and licked until it looked as though it had been kept for 3 days in an anthill. "It tasted a bit like goat, and it was as tender as coney. I don't recall eating anything like that."
"It was a skrek," said the elf, crunching the gristle with a crack. "Neither do I recall eating it at any time."
Boreas cleared his throat quietly. The barely audible note of sarcastic merriment in the elf's voice proved he knew that the roast came from an enormous rat with bloodshot eyes and huge teeth, only the tail of which measured 3 ells. The tracker had by no means hunted the gigantic rodent. He had shot it in self-defense, but had decided to roast it. He was a sensible and clear-headed man. He wouldn't have eaten a rat scavenging on rubbish heaps and eating scraps, but it was a good 300 miles from the narrow passage of the Elskadeg Pass to the nearest community capable of generating waste. The rat, or as the elf had said, skrek, must have been clean and healthy. It hadn't had any contact with civilization, so there was nothing it could have been soiled by or infected with. Soon, the last, smallest bone, chewed and sucked clean, landed in the embers. The moon rose over the jagged range of the fiery mountains. The wind fed the fire and sparks shot up, dying out and fading amidst the countless twinkling stars. "Long on the road, gentlemen?" Boreas Munn risked another none-too-discreet question. "Here, in the wildernesses. Left the Solviga gate behind you long since, if you'll pardon my asking." "Long since? Long since," said the pilgrim, "is a relative thing. I passed through Solviga Gate the 2nd day after the September full moon."
"Me on the 6th day,"
said the elf. "Huh," continued Boreas Munn, encouraged by the reaction. "It's a wonder we've only met up now, because I also walked that way, or actually rode, for I still had a horse then." He fell silent, driving away the unpleasant thoughts and recollections linked to the horse and its loss. He was sure his accidental companions must also have had similar adventures. If they'd been walking the whole time, they never would have caught up with him here, near Elskadeg. "I venture thus," he continued, "that you set off right after the war, after the Peace of Sintra was concluded, gentlemen. It's none of my business, naturally, but I dare suppose that you were not pleased by the order and vision of the world created and established in Sintra." The lengthy silence that fell by the campfire was interrupted by distant howling. A wolf, probably, although in the vicinity of the Elskadeg Pass you could never be certain.
"If I'm to be frank," the elf spoke up unexpectedly, "I didn't have the grounds to be pleased with the world and its image following the Peace of Sintra, not to mention the New Order."
"In my case it was similar," said the pilgrim, crossing his powerful forearms on his chest, "though I came to realize it, as a friend said, post factum." Silence reigned for a long time. Even whatever had been howling on the pass was silent. "At first," continued the pilgrim, although Boreas and the elf had been ready to bet he would not, "at first, Everything indicated that the peace of Sintra would bring favourable changes, would create quite a tolerable world order, if not for everyone, then at least for me. If my memory serves me, Boreas cleared his throat. The kings arrived in Sintra in April? The 2nd of April, to be precise, the pilgrim corrected him. It was, I recall, a full moon. Along the walls, positioned below the dark beams supporting a small gallery, hung rows of shields with colourful representations of the heraldic emblems and coats of arms of the Cintran nobility. A first glance revealed the differences between the now somewhat faded arms of the ancient families and those of families ennobled more recently during the reigns of Dagorad and Calanthe. The newer ones had vivid and not yet cracked paint, and no peppering of woodworm holes was visible on them, whereas the escutcheons of the more recently ennobled Nilfgaardian families, rewarded during the capture of the castle and the 5-year imperial administration, had the most vivid colours. When we regain Sintra, thought King Foltest, it will be necessary to make sure the Cintrans don't destroy those shields in a fervour of revival. Politics is one thing, the hall's decor another. Changes in regimes cannot be a justification for vandalism. So, everything began here, thought Dijkstra, looking around the great hall. The celebrated betrothal banquet, during which the steel Urchian appeared and demanded the hand of Princess Favetta, and Queen Calanthe engaged the Witcher. How bizarre are the twists of human fate, thought the spy, surprising himself at the banality of his own musings. 5 years ago, thought Queen Maeve. 5 years ago, the brain of Calanthe, the lioness of the blood of the Serbians, splashed onto the floor of the courtyard. This very courtyard I can see from the windows. Calanthe, whose proud portrait we saw in the corridor, was the penultimate living carrier of the royal blood. After her daughter, Pavetta, drowned, the only one left was her granddaughter, Cirilla. Unless the news that Cirilla is also dead is true.
Please,
Cyrus Engelkind Hemelfart, the hierarch of Novigrad, accepted on grounds of age, position, and universal respect, per acclamationem, as the chairman of the meeting, beckoned with a trembling hand.
Please, take your seats.
They found their chairs, which were marked by mahogany plaques, and sat down at the round table. Maeve, Queen of Rivia and Lyria, Foltest, King of Temeria, and his vassal, King Wentzlav of Brugge, Demavend, King of Aedion, Henselt, King of Caedwin, King Ethain of Sidaris, young King Kistrin of Verden, Duke Neithert, head of the Redanian Regency Council, and Count Dijkstra.
We must rid ourselves of that spy. Remove him from the conference table, thought the hierarch. King Henselt and King Foltest, why, even young Kistrin, have taken the liberty of making sour remarks, so at any moment there'll be a démarche from the Nilfgaardian representatives. Sigismund Dijkstra is a man of unseemly breeding, and furthermore a person with a dirty past and bad reputation. A persona turpis. One cannot let the presence of a persona turpis infect the atmosphere of the negotiations.
The head of the Nilfgaardian delegation, Baron Shillard Fitzosterlin, who had been allotted a place at the round table immediately opposite Dijkstra, greeted the spy with a polite diplomatic bow. Seeing that everybody was now seated, the hierarch of Novigrad also sat down, not without the help of pages supporting him by his trembling arms. The hierarch sat down on a chair made for Queen Calanthe many years before. The chair had an impressively high and richly decorated backrest, making it stand out among the other ones. So it was here, thought Tris Merigold, looking around the chamber, staring at the tapestries, paintings, and numerous hunting trophies, and the antlers of a horned animal totally unfamiliar to her. It was here, after the infamous shambles in the throne room, where the famous private conversation between Calanthe, the Witcher, Pavetta, and the enchanted Urchian occurred. When Calanthe gave her agreement to that bizarre marriage, and Pavetta was already pregnant. Ciri was born almost 8 months later. Ciri,
The heir to the throne. The lion cub from the lioness's blood. Ciri, my little sister, who's still somewhere far away in the south. Fortunately, she's no longer alone. She's with Geralt and Yennefer. She's safe. Unless they've lied to me again. Sit down, dear ladies, urged Philippa Eilhart, who had been scrutinizing Triss closely for some time. In a short while, the rulers of the world will begin making their inaugural speeches, one after another. I wouldn't want to miss a word. The sorceresses, interrupting their furtive gossiping, quickly took their seats. Shayla de Tankerville, in a boa of silver fox, which gave a feminine accent to her severe male outfit. Azirivar Anahid in a dress of mauve silk, which extremely gracefully combined modest simplicity with chic elegance. Francesca Finderbear, regal as usual. Ida Emain Epsivny, mysterious as usual. Margarita Lozantile, distinguished and serious. Sabrina Glevissig in turquoise. Kira Metz in green and daffodil yellow. And Fringilla Vigo, dejected, sad, and pale with a truly deathly, morbid, utterly ghastly paleness. Triss Merigold was sitting beside Kira, opposite Fringilla. A painting depicting a horseman galloping headlong down a road between an avenue of alders hung above the head of the Nilfgaardian sorceress. The alders were holding out their monstrous arm-like boughs towards the rider, sneeringly smiling with the ghastly maws of their hollows. Triss shuddered involuntarily. The three-dimensional telecommunicator standing in the middle of the table was active. Philippa Eilhart used a spell to focus the image and sound. "Ladies, as you can see and hear," she said, not without a sneer, "the rulers of the world are at this very moment getting down to deciding the fate of it in the throne room of Cintra, plumb beneath us, one floor lower. And we, here, one floor above them, will be watching over, so that the boys don't go too wild." Other howlers joined the howler howling in Elskadeg. Boreas had no doubt. They weren't wolves. "I hadn't expected much from those Cintran talks either," he said, in order to revive the dead conversation. "Why, no one I know expected any good to come of them." "The simple fact that the negotiations began was important," calmly protested the pilgrim. "A simple fellow, and I indeed am just such a fellow, if I may say so, thinks simply. A simple fellow knows that the warring kings and emperors aren't that furious with each other. If they could have, if they'd had the strength, they'd have killed each other. That they've stopped trying to kill each other, and instead have sat down to a round table, that means they have no more power. They are, to put it simply, powerless. And the result of that powerlessness is that no armed men are attacking a simple fellow's homestead. They aren't killing, aren't mutilating, aren't burning down buildings. They aren't cutting children's throats, aren't raping wives or driving people into captivity. No. Instead of that, they've gathered in Cintra and are negotiating. Let's rejoice." The elf finished poking with his stick a log in the fire that was shooting sparks, and looked askance at the pilgrim.
"Even a simple fellow,"
he said, not concealing the sarcasm.
"Even if he's joyful, why, even euphoric, ought to understand that politics is also a war, just conducted a little differently. He ought to understand that negotiations are like trade. They have the same self-propelling mechanism. Negotiated successes are bought with concessions. You win some, you lose some. In other words, in order for some people to be bought, others have to be sold."
"Indeed," the pilgrim said after a while. "It's so simple and obvious that every man understands it, even a simple one."
"No, no, and once more, no!"
yelled King Henselt, banging both fists on the table so hard he knocked over a goblet and made the inkwells jump.
"No discussions on that subject. No horse trading in this matter. That's the end of it. That's the derieth."
"Henselt, Foltest spoke calmly, soberly, and very placatingly. Don't make things difficult, and don't embarrass us in front of His Excellency with your yelling. Shilard Fitz-Osterlin, negotiator for the Empire of Nilfgaard, bowed with a false smile, which was meant to imply that the King of Kaedwen's antics were neither shocking nor bothering him. "We are negotiating with the Empire," continued Foltest, "and amongst ourselves we've suddenly begun to bite each other like dogs. It's a disgrace, Henselt." "We've reached agreement with Nilfgaard in matters as difficult as Dol Angra and Riverdale," said Dijkstra, apparently casually. "It would be stupid." "I won't have such remarks," roared Henselt, this time so loudly that not even a buffalo would have matched him. "I won't put up with such remarks, particularly from spies of all people. I'm the king, for fuck's sake."
"That's quite plain," snorted Maeve. Demavend, his back to them, was looking at the escutcheons on the wall, smiling contemptuously, quite as if the game was not about his kingdom.
"Enough!"
panted Henselt, eyes roving around.
"Enough! Enough, by the gods! Or my blood will boil. I said not a span of land. No, but no repossession. I won't agree to my kingdom being reduced by so much as a span, even half a span of land. The gods entrusted me with the honour of Kaedwen, and only to the gods will I give it up. The lower marches is our land. Our ethnic land. The lower marches have belonged to Kaedwen for centuries. Upper Aedion," Dijkstra spoke again, "has belonged to Kaedwen since last year. To be precise, since the 24th of July last year, from the moment a Kaedwenian occupying force invaded it."
"I request," Shilard Fitz-Osterlin said without being asked, "for it to be minuted ad futuram re memoriam that the Empire of Nilfgaard had nothing to do with that annexation."
"Apart from the fact that it was pillaging Vengerberg at the time?"
"Nihil ad rem."
"Indeed?"
"Gentlemen," Foltest admonished.
"The Kaedwenian army," rasped Henselt, "entered the lower marches as liberators. My soldiers were welcomed there with flowers. My soldiers—"
"Your bandits." King Demavend's voice was calm, but it was apparent from his face how much effort it was costing him. "Your brigands who invaded my kingdom with a murderous hussar, murdered, raped, and looted. Gentlemen, we have gathered here and have been debating for a week. We're debating about what the future face of the world should be. By the gods, is it to be a face of crime and pillage? Is the murderous status quo to be maintained? Are plundered goods to remain in the hands of the thug and the marauder?" Henselt seized a map from the table, tore it up with a violent movement, and hurled it towards Demavend. The King of Aedion didn't even move.
"My army,"
wheezed Henselt, and his face took on the colour of good old wine,
"captured the marches from the Nilfgaardians. Your woeful kingdom didn't even exist then, Demavend. I shall say more. Had it not been for my army, you wouldn't even have a kingdom today. I'd like to see you driving the Black Cloaks over the Yoruga and beyond Dol Angra without my help. Thus the statement that you're king by my grace wouldn't be much of an exaggeration. But here my generosity ends. I said I won't give up even a span of my land. I won't let my kingdom be diminished."
"Nor I." Demavend stood up. "We shall not reach agreement then."
"Gentlemen,"
Cyrus Hemmelfart, the hierarch of Novigrad, who had been slumbering until then, suddenly spoke in a placatory manner.
"some kind of compromise is surely possible."
"The Empire of Nilfgaard," began again Shilard Fitz-Osterlin, who liked to butt in out of the blue, "will not accept any deal that would be damaging to the land of Elves in Dol Blatana. If necessary, I shall read you once again the contents of the memorandum." Henselt, Foltest, and Dijkstra snorted, but Demavend looked at the Imperial ambassador calmly and almost benignly. "For the general good and for peace," he declared, "I recognize the autonomy of Dol Blatana, not as a kingdom, but as a duchy. The condition is that Duchess Enid Angleana pays liege homage to me and obligates herself to grant equal rights and privileges to humans and elves. I'm prepared to do that,
as I have said, pro publico bono.
Spoken like a true king, said Maeve.
Salus publica lex suprema est,
said Hierarch Hemmelfart, who had also been searching for some time for the chance to show off his knowledge of diplomatic jargon. I shall add, nonetheless, continued Demavend, looking at the pompous Henselt, that the concession regarding Dolblatana is not a precedent. It is the only encroachment on the integrity of my lands to which I shall agree. I shall not recognize any other partition. The Caedwanian army that invaded my borders as an aggressor and invader has 1 week to abandon the illegally occupied fortalices and castles of Upper Aedion. That is the condition of my further participation in this conference, and because, verba volant, my secretary shall submit to the minutes an official démarche in the case. Henselt? Foltest looked hesitantly at the bearded king.
Never!
Roared the king of Caedwen, knocking over a chair and hopping like a chimpanzee stung by a hornet.
I'll never give up the marches. Over my dead body. Never. Nothing will make me. No force. No fucking force.
And in order to prove he was also well-born and educated, he howled,
Non possumus.
I'll give him non possumus, the old fool, snorted Sabrina Glevissig in the upstairs chamber. You need not worry, ladies. I'll force that blockhead to recognize the repossession demands in the case of Upper Aedion. The Caedwanian army will leave before 10 days are up. The matter is clear. No two ways about it. If any of you doubted it, I have the right to feel piqued indeed.
Philippa Eilhart and Sherla de Tankerville expressed their acknowledgement by bowing. Izireva Anahid gave her thanks with a smile.
All that remains today, said Sabrina, is to settle the matter of Dolblatana. We know the contents of Emperor Emir's memorandum. The kings down below still haven't had the chance to discuss that matter, but have signalled their preferences, and the most, I would say, interested party has taken a stance. That's King Demavend.
Demavend's stance, said Sherla de Tankerville, wrapping the silver foxbur around her neck, bears the features of a far-reaching compromise. It's a positive, considered and balanced stance. Gillard Fitz-Ostlin will have considerable difficulty trying to argue in the direction of greater concessions. I don't know if he'll want to.
He will, Azireva Anahid stated calmly, because those are the instructions he has from Nilfgaard. He will invoke ad referendum and submit notes. He'll argue for at least a day. After that time has passed, he'll begin to make concessions. That's normal. Sabrina Glevissig cut her off. It's normal that they'll finally find some common ground and agree on something. We won't wait for that. We'll decide right away what they'll ultimately be permitted to do. Francesca, say something. It's about your country, after all. Just for that reason. The Daisy of the Valleys smiled very beautifully. Just for that reason, I'm keeping quiet, Sabrina. Get over your pride, Margarita Lozantila said gravely. We have to know what we can allow the kings. Francesca Finderbear smiled even more beautifully. For the sake of peace and pro bono publico, she said, I agree to King Demavend's offer. From this moment, you may stop addressing me as your Royal Highness, my dear girls. An ordinary, your enlightenment will suffice. Elven jokes, Sabrina grimaced, don't amuse me at all, probably because I don't understand them. What about Demavend's other conditions? Francesca fluttered her eyelashes. I agree to the re-immigration of human settlers and the return of their estates, she said gravely. I guarantee equality to all races. For the love of the gods, Enid, laughed Philippa Eilhart. Don't agree to everything. Set some conditions. I shall. The elf suddenly grew more serious. I don't agree to liege homage. I want Dolblatana as a freehold. No vassal duties, apart from an oath of loyalty, and no actions to the detriment of the suzerain. Demavend won't agree, Philippa commented curtly. He won't waive the income and rent that the Valley of Flowers gave him. In that matter, Francesca raised her eyebrows. I'm prepared to negotiate bilaterally. I'm sure we can achieve consensus. The freehold doesn't demand payment, but it doesn't forbid nor exclude it either.
And what about familial inheritance? Philippa Eilhart kept digging. What about primogeniture? By agreeing to a freehold, Foltest will want a guarantee of the duchy's indivisibility. My complexion and figure may indeed beguile Foltest, Francesca smiled again. But I'm surprised at you, Philippa. The age when falling pregnant was a possibility is far, far behind me. Regarding primogeniture and fideicomissum, Demavend ought not to be afraid, for I shall be the ultimus familiae of the dynasty of Dolbretana's monarchs. But in spite of the age difference Demavend sees as advantageous, we will be resolving the issue of inheritance not with him, but rather his grandchildren. I assure you, ladies, there will be no moot points in this matter. Not in this one, agreed Azirava Anahid, looking into the sorceress's elven eyes. And what about the matter of the squirrel commando units? What about the elves who fought for the Empire? If I'm not mistaken, this mainly concerns your subjects, Madame Francesca. The Daisy of the Valleys stopped smiling. She glanced at Ida Emean, but the silent elf from the Blue Mountains avoided her gaze. Pro publico bono, she began and broke off. Asira, also very serious, nodded her understanding. What to do? She said slowly. Everything has its price. War demands casualties. Peace, it turns out, does too. Aye, true in every respect, the pilgrim repeated pensively, looking at the elf sitting with head lowered. Peace talks are a market, a country fair, so that some people can be bought, others must be sold. Thus the world runs its course. The point is not to pay too high a price.
And not to sell oneself too cheaply,
finished the elf, without raising his head.
Traitors, despicable good-for-nothings, whoresons, Anbadriachan Kuach, Nilfgaardian dogs.
Silence, roared Hamilcar Dancer, slamming an armoured fist onto the balustrade of the cloister. The archers on the gallery pointed their crossbows at the elves crowded into the cul-de-sac. Calm down, Danza roared even more loudly. Enough! Quieten down, gentlemen officers, a little more dignity. Do you have the audacity to talk of dignity, blackguard? Yelled Coinach de Reo. We spilled blood for you, accursed Doina, for you and your emperor, who received an oath of fealty from us. And this is how you repay it? You hand us over to those murderers from the north, as felons, as criminals? Enough, I said. Danza slammed his fist hard onto the balustrade again. Acknowledge this fait accompli, gentle elves. The agreements reached in Sintra as conditions of the peace treaty being concluded impose on the Empire the duty to turn over war criminals to the Nordlings. Criminals, shouted Riordan. Criminals, you wretched Doina. War criminals, repeated Dancer, paying no attention whatsoever to the unrest below him. Any officers who stand accused of proven charges of terrorism, murdering civilians, killing and torturing captives, massacring the wounded in field hospitals. You whoresons, yelled Angus Brickree. We killed because we were at war. We killed on your orders. Kak de ep ers bloededoine. It has been ruled, repeated Danza. Your insults and shouts won't change anything. Please, go to the guardhouse one at a time and put up no resistance while being manacled. We should have stayed when they were fleeing across the Yarulga. Riordan ground his teeth. We should have stayed and fought on in the commando units. But we, idiots, fools, dolts, kept our soldierly oath. Serves us right. Isengrim Foeltiana, the Iron Wolf, the most celebrated, now almost legendary commander of the Squirrels, presently an imperial colonel, tore the silver lightning bolts of the Vriheth Brigade from his sleeve and spalder, stony-faced, and threw them down in the courtyard. The other officers followed his example. Hamilcar Danza frowned from the gallery as he watched this. An irresponsible demonstration, he said. Furthermore,
In your place, I wouldn't rid myself so lightly of imperial insignia. I feel the duty to inform you that as imperial officers, during the negotiations of the conditions of the peace treaty, you were guaranteed fair trials, lenient sentences, and a swift amnesty. The elves, crowded into the cul-de-sac, roared in unison with laughter that thundered and boomed amidst the walls. I also draw your attention to the fact, Hamilcar Danza added calmly, that it's only you we are handing over to the Nordlings, 32 officers, and not one of the soldiers you commanded. Not one. The laughter in the cul-de-sac ceased in an instant. The wind blew on the campfire, stirring up a shower of sparks and blowing smoke into their eyes. Again, howling could be heard from the pass.
They prostituted everything.
The elf broke the silence.
Everything was for sale. Honor, loyalty, our bonds, vows, everyday decency. They were simply chattels, having a value as long as there was a trade in them and a demand. And once there wasn't, they weren't worth a straw and were discarded onto the dust heap.
Onto the dust heap of history, the pilgrim nodded. You're right, Master Elf. That's how it was back then in Sintra. Everything had its price and was worth as much as it could be traded for. The market opened every morning, and, like a real market, now and again there'd be unexpected booms and crashes. And, just like a real market, one couldn't help but get the impression somebody was pulling the strings.
Am I hearing right? Shilard Fitz-Osterlin asked in a slow, drawling voice, expressing disbelief in his tone and facial expression. Do my ears deceive me? Berengar Leuwarden, special imperial envoy, didn't deign to reply. Sprawled in an armchair, he continued to contemplate the ripples of wine as he rocked his goblet. Shilard puffed himself up, then assumed a mask of contempt and superiority, which said, either you're lying, blackguard, or you wish to trick me, test me out. In both cases I've seen through you.
So am I to understand, he said, sticking his chest out, that after far-reaching concessions in the matter of borders, in the matter of prisoners of war and the repayment of spoils, in the matter of the officers of the Vrihed Brigade and the Scoia'tael Commando units, the Emperor orders me to compromise and accept the Nordlings' impossible claims regarding the repatriation of settlers?
You understood perfectly, Baron, replied Berengar Leuwarden, drawing out his syllables characteristically. Indeed, I am full of admiration for your perspicacity.
By the great sun, Lord Leuwarden, do you in the capital ever consider the consequences of your decisions? The Nordlings are already whispering that our empire is a giant with feet of clay. Now they're crying that they've defeated us, beaten us, driven us away. Does the Emperor understand that to make further concessions means to accept their arrogant and excessive ultimatums? Does the Emperor understand that if they treat this as a sign of weakness, it may have lamentable results in the future? Does the Emperor understand, finally, what fate awaits those several thousand settlers of ours in Brugge and Lyria?
Berengar Leuwarden stopped rocking his goblet and fixed his coal-black eyes on Shilard. I have given you an imperial order, Baron, he muttered through his teeth. When you have carried it out and returned to Nilfgaard, you may ask the Emperor yourself why he's so unwise. Perhaps you mean to reprimand the Emperor, scold him, chide him? Why not? But alone, without my mediation. Aha, thought Shilard. Now I know. The new Stefan Skellen is sitting before me, and I must behave with him as with Skellen. But it's obvious he didn't come here without a goal. An ordinary courier could have brought the order. Well, he began, apparently freely, in a positively familiar tone. Woe to the vanquished! But the imperial order is clear and precise, and it shall be carried out thus.
I shall also try hard to make it look like the result of negotiations and not abject submissiveness. I know something about that. I've been a diplomat for 30 years, with 4 generations before me. My family is one of the wealthiest, most prominent, and influential.
I know, to be sure. Leuwarden interrupted him with a slight smirk. That's why I'm here. Shillard bowed slightly and waited patiently. The difficulties in understanding, began the envoy, rocking his goblet, occurred because you, dear Baron, chose to think that victory and conquest are based on senseless genocide, on thrusting a standard somewhere in the blood-soaked ground and crying, "All this is mine, I have captured it." A similar opinion is regrettably quite widespread. For me, though, sir, as also for the people who gave me my powers, victory and conquest depend on diametrically different things. Victory should look thus. The defeated are compelled to buy goods manufactured by the victors. Why, they do it willingly, because the victor's goods are better and cheaper. The victor's currency is stronger than the currency of the defeated, and the vanquished trust it much more than their own. Do you understand me, Baron Fitz-Osterlen? Are you beginning slowly to differentiate the victors from the vanquished? Do you comprehend whom woe actually betides? The ambassador nodded to confirm he did. But in order to consolidate the victory and render it binding, Leuwarden continued a moment later, drawing out his syllables, peace must be concluded. Quickly and at any cost. Not some truce or armistice, but peace. A creative compromise, a constructive accord, and without the imposition of trade embargoes, retortions of customs duty and protectionism. Shillard nodded again to confirm he knew what it was about. Not without reason have we destroyed their agriculture and ruined their industry. Leuwarden continued in a calm, drawling, unemotional voice. We did it in order for them to have to buy our goods owing to a scarcity of theirs. But our merchants and goods won't get through hostile and closed borders. And what will happen then? I shall tell you what will happen then, my dear Baron. A crisis of overproduction will occur because our manufactories are working at full tilt. The maritime trading companies who entered into collaboration with Novigrad and Kovia would also suffer great losses. Your influential family, my dear Baron, has considerable shares in those companies. And the family, as you are no doubt aware, is the basic unit of society. Are you aware of that? I am. Shillard Fitz-Osterlen lowered his voice, although the chamber was tightly sealed against eavesdropping. I understand. I comprehend. Though I'd like to be certain I'm carrying out the Emperor's order, not that of some corporation. Emperors pass, drawled Leuwarden, and corporations survive, and will survive. But that's a truism. I understand your anxieties, Baron. You can be certain, sir, that I'm carrying out an order issued by the Emperor, aimed at the Empire's good and its interest. Issued, I don't deny it, as a result of advice given to the Emperor by a certain corporation. The envoy opened his collar and shirt, demonstrating a golden medallion, on which was depicted a star set in a triangle surrounded by flames. A pretty ornament, Shillard confirmed with a smile and a slight bow that he understood. I'm aware it is very expensive and exclusive. Can they be had anywhere? No, stated Berengar Leuwarden with emphasis. You have to earn them.
If you permit, my lady and gentlemen.
The voice of Shillard Fitzosterlin assumed a special tone, already familiar to the debaters, that signified that what the ambassador was about to say was considered by him to be of the utmost importance.
If you permit, my lady and gentlemen, I shall read the aide-memoire sent me by His Imperial Highness, Emir va Emrys, by grace of the Great Sun, the Emperor of Nilfgaard.
Oh no, not again.
Demavend ground his teeth, and Dijkstra just groaned. This did not escape Shillard's attention, because it couldn't have.
The note is long, he admitted, so I shall praise it rather than read it. His Imperial Highness expresses his great gladness concerning the course of the negotiations, and as a peace-loving man, joyfully receives the compromises and reconciliations achieved. His Imperial Highness wishes further progress in the negotiations, and the resolution to them to the mutual benefit of
"Let us get down to business, then." Foltest interrupted in mid-sentence, and briskly, "Let's finish it to our mutual benefit and return home."
That's right, said Henselt, who had the furthest to go. Let's finish, for if we dally, we're liable to be caught by the winter.
One more compromise awaits us, reminded Maeve. A matter which we have barely touched on several times, probably for fear that we're liable to fall out over it. It's time to overcome that fear. The problem won't vanish just because we're afraid of it.
Indeed, confirmed Foltest. So, let's get to work.
Let's settle the status of Cintra, the problem of succession to the throne of Calanthe's heir. It's a difficult problem, but I don't doubt we'll cope with it. Shall we not, Your Excellency?
Oh,
Fitzosterlin smiled diplomatically and mysteriously.
I'm certain that the matter of the succession to the throne of Cintra will go like clockwork. It's an easier matter than you all suppose, my lady and gentlemen.
I submit for consideration, announced Philippa Eilhart in quite an indisputable tone, the following project. We shall turn Cintra into a trust territory. We'll grant Foltest of Temeria a mandate. That Foltest is getting too big for his boots, Sabrina Glevisig grimaced. He has too large an appetite. Brugge, Sodden, Angren, we need, Philippa cut her off, a strong state at the mouth of the Yaruga and on the Marnadal stairs.
I don't deny it, Sherla de Tankerville nodded. It's of necessity to us, but not to Emir va Emrys, and compromise, not conflict, is our aim.
A few days ago, reminded Francesca Findebear, Shillard suggested building a demarcation line, dividing Cintra into spheres of influence, into northern and southern zones.
Nonsense and childishness, snorted Margarita Lozantila. Such divisions are senseless, are only the seeds of conflicts. I think Cintra ought to be turned into a jointly governed principality, said Sherla, with power exercised by appointed representatives of the northern kingdoms and the Empire of Nilfgaard. The city and port of Cintra will receive the status of a free city. Would you like to say something, my dear Madame Ciri? Please do. I admit I usually prefer discourses consisting of full, complete utterances, but please proceed. We're listening.
All of the sorceresses, including Fringilla Vigo, who was as white as a sheet, fixed their eyes on Azira va Anahid. The Nilfgaardian sorceress wasn't disconcerted. I suggest we concentrate on other problems, she declared in her soft, pleasant voice. Let's leave Cintra in peace. I have so far been unable to inform you all of certain matters about which I've received reports. The matter of Cintra, distinguished sisters, has already been solved and taken care of. I beg your pardon? Philippa's eyes narrowed. What do you mean by that, if one may ask? Triss Merigold gasped loudly. She had already guessed, already knew what was meant by it. Vatier de Rideau was downhearted and morose.
His charming and wonderful lover, the golden-haired Cantarella, had dropped him suddenly and unexpectedly, without giving any arguments or explanations. For Vattier, it was a blow, an awful blow, following which he moped about dejectedly, and was agitated, distracted, and stupefied. He had to be very attentive, be very guarded, so as not to blot his copybook, nor make a faux pas in conversation with the Emperor. Times of great changes did not favour the agitated and incompetent. "We have already repaid the Guild of Merchants for their invaluable help," said Emir var Emrys, frowning. "We've given them enough privileges, more than they received from the previous 3 emperors combined. As regards Berengar Leuwarden, we are also indebted to him for his help in uncovering the conspiracy. He has received a senior and remunerative position, but if it turns out he is incompetent, he'll be kicked out, in spite of his services. It would be well if he knew that."
"I'll do my utmost, Your Highness. And what about Dijkstra, and that mysterious informer of his?"
"Dijkstra would rather die than reveal who his informer is. It would indeed be worth repaying him for that invaluable news. But how? Dijkstra won't accept anything from me."
"If I may, Your Imperial Majesty."
"Speak."
"Dijkstra will accept information, something he doesn't know and would like to. Your Highness can repay him with information."
"Well done, Vattier." Vattier de Rideau sighed with relief. He turned his head away and took a deep breath, for which reason he was first to notice the ladies approaching, Stella Congreve, the Countess of Lidertal, and the fair-haired girl entrusted into her care.
"They're coming."
He gestured with a movement of his eyebrows.
"Your Imperial Majesty, may I take the liberty of reminding reasons of state, the Empire's interests?"
"Stop!" Emir var Emrys cut him off truculently. "I said I'd ponder it. I'll think the matter over and make a decision, and after taking it, I'll inform you what the decision is."
"Yes, Your Imperial Majesty."
"What else?" The white flame of Nilfgaard impatiently slapped a glove against the hip of a marble nereid adorning the fountain's pedestal. "Why are you still here, Vattier?"
"The matter of Stefan Skellen?"
"I shall not show mercy. Death to the traitor, but after an honest and thorough trial."
"Yes, Your Imperial Majesty."
Emir didn't even glance at him as he bowed and walked away. He was looking at Stella Congreve and the fair-haired girl. "Here comes the interest of the Empire," he thought. "The bogus princess, the bogus Queen of Sintra, the bogus ruler of the mouth of the river Yara, which means so much to the Empire. Here she approaches, eyes lowered, terrified, in a white silk dress and green gloves, with a peridot necklace on her slight décolletage. Back then in Dan Rowan, I complimented her on that dress, praised the choice of jewellery. Stella knows my taste. But what am I to do with the young thing? Put her on a pedestal? Noble ladies." He bowed first. In Nilfgaard, apart from in the throne room, courtly respect and courtesy regarding women even applied to the Emperor. They responded with deep curtsies and lowered heads. They were standing before a courteous Emperor, but still an Emperor. Emir had had enough of etiquette. "Stay here, Stella," he ordered dryly. "And you, girl, will accompany me on a stroll. Take my arm, head up. Enough. I've had enough of those curtsies. It's just a walk." They walked down an avenue, amidst shrubs and hedges barely in leaf. The Imperial bodyguard, soldiers from the elite Impera Brigade, the famous salamanders, stayed on the sidelines, but always on the alert. They knew when not to disturb the Emperor. They passed a pond, empty and melancholy. The ancient carp, released by Emperor Torres, had died 2 days earlier. "I'll release a new, young, strong, beautiful specimen," thought Emir var Emrys. "I'll order a medal with my likeness and the date to be attached to it. Vaesa deread ep egean. Something has ended. Something is beginning. It's a new era, new times, a new life. So let there be a new carp too, damn it. Deep in thought, he almost forgot about the girl on his arm, about her warmth, her lily-of-the-valley fragrance, and the interest of the Empire, in that order and no other. They stood by the pond, in the middle of which an artificial island rose out of the water, and on it a rock garden, a fountain, and a marble sculpture. Do you know what that figure depicts? She didn't reply right away.
Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. It's a pelican, which pecks its own breast open to feed its young on its blood. It is an allegory of noble sacrifice, and also...
I'm listening to you attentively.
And also of great love.
Do you think? He turned her to face him and pursed his lips. That the torn open breast hurts less because of that?
I don't know, she stammered. Your Imperial Majesty,
He took hold of her hand. He felt her shudder. The shudder ran along his hand, arm and shoulder. My father, he said, was a great ruler, but never had a head for legends or myths, never had time for them, and always mixed them up. Whenever he brought me here to the park, I remember it like yesterday, he always said that the sculpture shows a pelican rising from its ashes. Well, girl, at least smile when the Emperor tells a funny story. Thank you. That's much better. The thought that you aren't glad to be walking here with me would be unpleasant to me. Look me in the eyes.
I'm glad to be able to be here with Your Imperial Majesty. It's an honor for me, I know, but also a great joy. I'm enjoying.
Really? Or is it perhaps just courtly flattery? Etiquette, the good school of Stella Congreve? A line that Stella has ordered you to learn by heart? Admit it, girl. She was silent and lowered her eyes. Your Emperor has asked you a question, repeated Emir var Emrys. And when the Emperor asks, no one can dare be silent. No one can dare to lie either, of course.
Truly, she said melodiously. I'm truly glad, Your Imperial Majesty.
I believe you, Emir said a moment later. I believe you, although I'm surprised.
I also, she whispered back. I'm also surprised.
I beg your pardon? Don't be shy, please.
I'd like to be able to go for walks more often and talk. But I understand. I understand that it's not possible.
You understand well. He bit his lip. Emperors rule their empires, but two things they cannot rule, their hearts and their time. Those two things belong to the empire.
I know that only too well, she whispered.
I shall not be staying here long, he said, after a moment of oppressive silence. I must ride to Sintra and grace with my person the ceremony of the peace treaty being signed. You will return to Don Rowan. Raise your head, girl. Oh, no, that's the second time you sniffed in my presence. And what's that in your eyes? Tears? Oh, those are serious breaches of etiquette. I will have to express my most serious discontent to the Countess of Littertal. Raise your head, I said.
Please, forgive Madame Stella. Your Imperial Majesty. It's my fault, only mine. Madame Stella has taught me and prepared me well.
I've noticed and appreciate that. Don't worry. Stella Congreve isn't in danger of my disfavor, and never has been. I was making fun of you, reprehensibly.
I noticed,
whispered the girl, paling, horrified by her own audacity. But Emir just laughed, somewhat stiffly. I prefer you like that, he stated. Believe me, bold, just like... He broke off. Like my daughter, he thought. A sense of guilt tormented him like a dog worrying at him. The girl didn't take her eyes off him.
It's not just Stella's work, thought Emir. It really is her nature. In spite of appearances, she's a diamond that's hard to scratch. No, I won't let Vathier murder this child. Sintra is Sintra, and the interest of the Empire is the interest of the Empire. But this matter seems only to have one sensible and honourable solution. Give me your hand. It was an order delivered in a stern voice and tone. But in spite of that, he couldn't help but get the impression it was carried out willingly, without compulsion. Her hand was small and cool, but wasn't trembling now. What's your name? Just, please, don't say it's Cyrilla Fiona. Cyrilla Fiona? I feel like punishing you, girl, severely. I know, Your Imperial Majesty. I deserve it. But I have to be Cyrilla Fiona. One might suppose you regret you are not she, he said, not letting go of her hand. I do, she whispered. I do regret I'm not she. Indeed. If I were the real Cyrilla, the Emperor would look more favourably on me. But I'm only a counterfeit, a poor imitation, a double, not worthy of anything. Nothing. He turned around suddenly and grabbed her by the arms and released her at once. He took a step back. Yearning for a crown? Power? He was speaking softly but quickly, pretending not to see as she denied it with abrupt movements of her head. Honours, accolades, luxuries. He broke off, breathing heavily, pretending he couldn't see the girl still shaking her lowered head, still denying further hurtful accusations, perhaps all the more hurtful because of being unexpressed. He breathed out, deeply and loudly. Do you know, little moth, that what you see before you is a flame? I do, Your Imperial Majesty. They were silent for a long time. The scent of spring suddenly made them feel lightheaded, both of them. In spite of appearances, Emir finally said dully, being Empress is not an easy job. I don't know if I'll be able to love you. She nodded to show she also knew. He saw a tear on her cheek. Just like in Stigger Castle, he felt the tiny shard of cold glass lodged in his heart shift. He hugged her, pressed her hard to his chest, stroked her hair, which smelled of lilies of the valley. My poor little one, he said in an unfamiliar voice. My little one. My poor raison d'etat. Bells rang throughout Sintra, in a stately manner, deeply, solemnly, but somehow strangely mournfully. Unusual looks, thought Hierarch Hemmelfart, looking like everybody else at the hanging portrait, which measured, like all the others, at least 1 yard by 2. Strange looks. I'm absolutely certain she's some kind of half-breed. I'd swear she has the blood of the accursed elves in her veins. Pretty, thought Foltest. Prettier than the miniature the people from the intelligence service showed me. Oh well, portraits usually flatter. Utterly unlike Calanthe, thought Maeve. Utterly unlike Rugna. Utterly unlike Pavetta. There have been rumours. But no, that's impossible. She must have royal blood, must be the rightful ruler of Sintra. She must. It is demanded by raison d'etat and history. She's not the one I saw in my dreams, thought Esterad Tyson, King of Kovir, who had recently arrived in Sintra. She's certainly not that one.
But I shan't tell that to anyone. I'll keep it to myself and my Zuleika. Zuleika and I shall decide how we shall use the knowledge those dreams gave us."
"She was almost my wife, that Ciri," thought Kistrin of Verden. "I'd have been Duke of Cintra then, according to custom, the heir to the throne, and I'd probably have perished like Calanthe. It was fortunate. Oh, it was fortunate that she ran away from me then."
"Not even for a moment did I believe in the tale of great love at first sight," thought Chilard Fitz-Osterlin. "Not even for a moment. And yet Emir is marrying that girl. He's rejecting the chance for reconciliation with the dukes. Instead of the daughter of one of the Nilfgaardian dukes, he's taking Cirilla of Cintra for his wife. Why? In order to seize that miserable little country, half of which, if not more, I would anyway have gained for the Empire in negotiations. To seize the mouth of the Yaruga, which is in any case under the dominion of a Nilfgaardian Novigradian Coviran maritime trading company. I don't understand anything of this raison d'etat. I suspect they aren't telling me everything."
"Sorceresses," thought Dijkstra. "It's the sorceresses' handiwork. But let it be. It was clearly written that Ciri would become the Queen of Cintra, the wife of Emir and the Empress of Nilfgaard. Destiny clearly wanted that. Fate."
"Let it be," thought Triss Merigold. "May it remain like that, well and good. Ciri will be safe now. They'll forget about her. They'll let her live."
The portrait finally ended up in its place, and the servants who had hung it stood back and removed the ladders. In the long row of darkened and somewhat dusty paintings of the rulers of Cintra, beyond the collection of Serbins and Korums, beyond Corbett, Dagorad and Rögner, beyond the proud Calanthe and the melancholy Pavetta, hung the last portrait, depicting the currently reigning gracious monarch, the successor to the throne and to the royal blood. The portrait of a slim girl with fair hair and a sad gaze, wearing a white dress with green gloves. Cirilla, Fiona, Ellen Rhiannon, the Queen of Cintra and the Empress of Nilfgaard. Destiny, thought Philippa Eilhart, feeling Dijkstra's eyes on her.
"Poor child," thought Dijkstra, looking at the portrait. "She probably thinks it's the end of her worries and misfortunes. Poor child."
The bells of Cintra rang, frightening the seagulls.
Shortly after the end of the negotiations and the signing of the Peace of Cintra,
the pilgrim picked up the story.
a grand holiday, a celebration lasting several days, was held in Novigrad, the crowning moment of which was a great and ceremonial military parade. The day, as befitted the first day of a new era, was truly beautiful.
"Are we to understand," the elf asked sarcastically, "that you were present there, sir, at that parade?"
"In truth, I was a little late."
The pilgrim clearly wasn't the type to be disconcerted by sarcasm.
"The day, as I said, was beautiful. It promised thus from the very dawn."
Vascoin, the commandant of Drakenborg, until recently deputy to the chief of political affairs, impatiently struck his whip against the side of his boot.
"Faster over there, faster," he urged. "The next ones are waiting."
After that peace treaty signed in Cintra, we're snowed under here. The hangman, having put the nooses around the condemned men's necks, stepped back. Vascoin whacked his whip against his boot.
"If any of you has anything to say," he said dryly, "now is your last chance."
"Long live freedom," said Kybra ep Daiareth.
"The trial was fixed," said Orostes Copse, marauder, robber and killer. "Kiss my horse," said Robert Pilch, deserter.
"Tell Lord Dijkstra I'm sorry,"
said Jan Lennep, secret agent, condemned for bribery and thievery.
"I didn't mean to. I really didn't mean to,"
sobbed Istvan Igalfi, the fort's former commandant, removed from his position and arraigned before the tribunal for acts committed against female prisoners, as he tottered on a birch stump. The sun, as blinding as liquid gold, exploded above the fort's palisade. The gallows poles cast long shadows. A beautiful new sunny day rose over Drakenborg, the first day of a new era. Vascoin hit his whip against his boot. He raised and lowered his hand. Stumps were kicked out from under feet. All the bells of Novigrad tolled, their deep and plaintive sounds echoing against the roofs and mansards of merchants' residences, the echoes fading amongst the narrow streets. Rockets and fireworks shot up high. The crowd roared, cheered, threw flowers, tossed up their hats, waved handkerchiefs, favours, flags, why, even trousers. "Long live the free company! Hurrah!
Long live the condottieri!"
Lorenzo Mola saluted the crowd, blowing kisses to beautiful townswomen. "If they're going to pay bonuses as effusively as they cheer," he shouted over the tumult, "then we'll be rich."
"Pity,"
said Giulia Abbatemarco, with a lump in her throat.
"Pity Frontino didn't live to see this."
They walked their horses through the town's main street. Giulia, Adam Adieu Pangrat, and Lorenzo Mola, at the head of the company, dressed in their best regalia, formed up into fours, so even that none of the groomed and gleaming horses stuck their muzzles even an inch out of line. The condottieri's horses were, like their riders, calm and proud. They weren't frightened by the crowd's cheers and shouts, reacting with slight, faint, almost imperceptible jerks of their heads at the wreaths and flowers flying at them.
"Long live the condottieri! Long live Adieu Pangrat! Long live Pretty Kitty!"
Giulia furtively wiped away a tear, catching a carnation thrown from the crowd.
"I never dreamed," she said. "Such a triumph. Pity Frontino."
"You're a romantic," smiled Lorenzo Mola. "You're getting emotional, Giulia."
"I am. Attention, by my troth! Eyes left! Look!"
They sat up straight in the saddle, turning their heads towards the review stand and the thrones and seats arranged there.
"I'd see Foltest," thought Giulia. "That bearded one is probably Henselt of Kaedwen, and that handsome one Demavend of Aedion. That matron must be Queen Hedvig, and that pup beside her is Prince Radovid, son of the murdered king. Poor boy." "Long live the condottieri! Long live Giulia Abbatemarco! Hurrah for Adieu Pangrat! Hurrah for Lorenzo Mola! Long live Constable Natalis! Long live the kings! Long live Foltest, Demavend and Henselt!
"Long live Dykstra!" roared some toady.
"Long live His Holiness!"
yelled several voices paid to do so. Cyrus Engelkind Hemmelfart, the hierarch of Novigrad, stood up and greeted the crowd and the marching army with arms raised, rather inelegantly turning his rear towards Queen Hedvig and the minor Radovid, obscuring them with the tails of his voluminous robes.
"No one's going to shout 'Long live Radovid,'"
thought the prince, blocked by the hierarch's fat backside.
"No one's even going to look at me. No one will raise a cry in honour of my mother, nor mention my father. They won't shout his glory. Today, on the day of triumph, on the day of reconciliation, of the alliance to which my father, after all, contributed, which was why he was murdered."
He felt someone's eyes on the nape of his neck, as delicate as something he didn't know, or did, but only from his dreams. Something like the soft, hot caress of a woman's lips. He turned his head. He saw the dark, bottomless eyes of Philippa Eilhart fixed on him.
"Just you wait," thought the prince, looking away. "Just you wait."
No one could have predicted then, or guessed, that this 13-year-old boy, now a person without any significance in a country ruled by the Regency Council and Dykstra, would grow into a king. A king who, after paying back all the insults borne by himself and his mother, would pass into history as Radovid V, the Stern. The crowd cheered. Flowers rained down under the hooves of the parading horses of the condottieri. "Giulia?"
"Yes, adieu."
"Marry me. Be my wife." Pretty Kitty delayed her answer a long time as she recovered from her astonishment. The crowd cheered. The hierarch of Novigrad, sweaty, gasping for air like a large fat catfish, blessed the townspeople and the procession, town and world from the viewing stand.
"But you are married, Adam Pangrat."
"I'm separated. I'll get a divorce." Julia Abatimarco didn't answer. She turned her head away, astonished, disconcerted, and very happy. God knows why. The crowd cheered and threw flowers. Rockets and fireworks exploded with a crack over the rooftops. The bells of Novigrad moaned plaintively. A woman, thought Nenica. When I sent her away to war, she was a girl. She's returned a woman. She's confident, self-aware, serene, composed, feminine. She won that war by not allowing the war to destroy her. Deborah, Unaid continued her litany in a soft but sure voice, died of typhus in a camp at Maena. Trina drowned in the Huruga when a boat full of casualties capsized. Mira was killed by squirrel elves during an attack on a field hospital at Almeria. Katya. Go on, my child, Nenica urged her on gently. Katya, Unaid cleared her throat. Met a wounded Nilfgaardian in hospital. She went back to Nilfgaard with him after the peace was concluded, when prisoners of war were exchanged. I always say, sighed the stout priestess, that love knows no borders or cordons. What about Yola II? She's alive. Unaid hurried to assure her. She's in Maribor. Why doesn't she come back? The novice bowed her head. She won't return to the Temple Mother, she said softly. She's in the hospital of Mr. Milo Vanderbeck, the surgeon, the halfling. She said she wants to tend the sick, that she'll only devote herself to that. Forgive her, Mother Nenica. Forgive her? The priestess snorted. I'm proud of her. You're late, Philippa Eilhart hissed. You're late for a ceremony graced by kings, by 1,000 devils, Sigismund. Your arrogance regarding etiquette is well known enough for you not to have to flaunt it so blatantly, particularly today, on a day like this. I had my reasons. Dijkstra responded to the look of Queen Hedvig and the raised eyebrows of the hierarch of Novigrad with a bow. He noticed the grimace on the face of Priest Vilema and the expression of contempt on the impossibly handsome countenance of King Foltest. I have to talk to you, Phil. Philippa frowned. In private, most probably. That would be best. Dijkstra smiled faintly. If, however, you consider it appropriate, I'll agree to a few additional pairs of eyes. Let's say those of the beautiful ladies of Monte Calvo. Hush! Hissed the sorceress from behind her smiling lips. When can I expect an audience? I'll think about it and let you know. Now leave me in peace. This is a stately ceremony. It's a great celebration. Let me remind you of that, if you hadn't noticed yourself. A great celebration? We're on the threshold of a new era, Dijkstra. The spy shrugged. The crowd cheered. Fireworks shot into the sky. The bells of Novigrad tolled for the triumph, for the glory. But somehow they sounded strangely mournful. Hold the reins, Yara, said Lucien. I've grown hungry. I'd like a bite of something. Here, I'll wrap the strap over your arm. I know one's not much use. Yara felt a blush of shame and humiliation burning on his face. He still hadn't got used to it. He still had the impression that the whole world didn't have anything better to do than stare at his stump, at the sleeve sewn up over it. That the whole world didn't think of anything else but to look at his disability, to falsely sympathize with the cripple and falsely pity him, and secretly disdain him and treat him as something that unpleasantly disturbs the nice order by repulsively and blatantly existing, by daring to exist. Lucienne, he had to hand it to her, differed a little from the whole world in this respect. She neither pretended she couldn't see it, nor adopted an affected style of humiliating help and even more humiliating pity. Yara was close to thinking that the fair-haired young wagoner treated him naturally and normally. But he drove that thought away. He didn't accept it, for he still hadn't managed to treat himself normally. The wagon carrying military invalids creaked and rattled. Hot weather had come after a short period of rain, and the ruts created by military convoys had dried out and hardened into ridges and humps of fantastic shapes, over which the vehicle, being pulled by 4 horses, had to trundle. The wagon positively jumped over the bigger ruts, creaking, the coach body rocking like a ship in a storm. The swearing of the crippled soldiers, mainly lacking legs, was as exquisite as it was filthy, and in order not to fall, Lucienne hung on to Yara and hugged him, generously giving the boy her magical warmth, extraordinary softness, and the exciting mixture of the smell of horses, leather straps, hay oats, and young, intense, girlish sweat. The wagon lurched out of another pothole, and Yara took in the slack from the reins wound around his wrist. Lucienne, taking bites in turn from a hunk of bread and a sausage, cuddled up to his side. "Well, well." She noticed his brass medallion, and disgracefully exploited the fact that his hand was taken up by the reins. "Did they take you in too? A forget-me-not amulet? Oh, whoever invented that trinket was a real trickster. There was a great demand for them during the war, probably second only to vodka. And what girl's name is inside it? Let's take a gander. Lucienne." Yara blushed like a beetroot and felt as though the blood would gush from his cheeks at any moment. I must ask you not to open it. Forgive me, but it's personal. I don't want to offend you, but—" The wagon bounced. Lucienne cuddled up to him, and Yara shut up. "Ciri—" The wagoner spelled it out with difficulty, but it surprised Yara, who hadn't suspected the peasant girl of such far-reaching talents. "She won't forget you." She slammed the medallion shut, let go of the chain, and looked at the boy. "That's Cirilla, I mean. If she really loved you—" "Foolish spells and amulets. If she really loved you, she won't forget. She'll be faithful. She'll wait." "What for?" Yara lifted his stump. The girl squinted her cornflower blue eyes slightly. "If she really loved you," she repeated firmly, "she's waiting, and the rest's codswallop. I know it." "Do you have such great experience in this regard?" "None of your business." Now it was Lucienne's turn to blush slightly. "What I've had and with whom? And don't think I'm one of those what you only have to nod at, and she's ready to have some experiments in the hay. But I know what I know. If you love a fellow, you will have all of him, and not just bits. Then it's a hill of beans even if he's lost one of those bits." The wagon jumped. "You're simplifying it a bit," Yara said through clenched teeth, greedily sniffing up the girl's fragrance. "You're simplifying it a lot, and you're idealizing it a lot, Lucienne. You deign not to notice even a detail so slight that a man's ability to support a wife and family depends on whether he's in one piece. A cripple isn't capable—" "Hey, hey, hey!" She bluntly interrupted him. "Don't be blubbering on me frock. The black cloaks didn't tear your head off, and you're a brain box. You toil with your noggin. What are you staring at? I'm from the country, but I have ears and eyes. Quick enough to notice a detail so slight as someone's manner of speech that's truly lordly and learned. And what's more—" She bent her head and coughed. Yara also coughed. The wagon jumped. "And what's more," the girl finished, "I've heard what the others said. That you're a scribe and the priest at a temple. Then see for yourself that hand's a trifle, and that's that." The wagon hadn't bounced for some time, but Yara and Lucienne seemed not to notice it at all, and it didn't bother them at all. "I seem to attract scholars," the girl said after a longer pause. "There was one, once, made advances towards me. He was book-learned and schooled in academies. You could tell it from his name alone." "And what was it?" "Semester. Hey there, miss." Gefreiter Corncrake called from behind their backs. He was a nasty, gloomy man, wounded during the fighting for Maena. "Crack the whip above the gelding's rumps, miss. Your cart's crawling along like snot down a wall." "I swear," added another cripple, scratching himself on a stump covered in shiny scar tissue, visible under a rolled-up trouser leg, "this wilderness is getting me down. I'm really missing a tavern since, I tell you, I'd very love a beer. Can't we go any brisker?" "We can." Lucienne turned around on the box. "But if the shaft or a hub breaks on a clod, then for a Sunday or two you'll not be drinking beer but rainwater or birch juice, waiting for a lift. You can't walk, and I'm not going to take you on my back, am I?" "That's a great pity," Corncrake grinned, "for I dream at night of you taking me. On your back, I mean from behind. I like it like that. And you, miss, You arsehole of a cripple, Lucienne yelled. You stinking old goat, you... She broke off, seeing the faces of all the invalids sitting on the wagon suddenly covered in a death-like pallor.
Damn, sobbed one of them. And we were so close to home.
We're done for, said Corncrake quietly, and utterly without emotion, simply stating the fact. And they said, the thought flashed through Yara's head, that there weren't any more squirrels, that they'd all been killed, that the elven question, as they said, had been solved. There were 6 horsemen, but after a closer look, it turned out there were 6 horses but 8 riders. 2 of the steeds were carrying a pair of riders. All the horses were treading stiffly and out of rhythm, their heads drooping. They looked miserable. Lucienne gasped loudly. The elves came closer. They looked even worse than the horses. Nothing remained of their pride, of their hard-earned, supercilious, charismatic otherness. Their clothing, usually even on guerrillas from the commando units, smart and beautiful, was dirty, torn and stained. Their hair, their pride and joy, was dishevelled, matted with sticky filth and clotted blood. Their large eyes, usually vain and lacking in any expression, were now abysses of panic and despair. Nothing remained of their otherness. Death, terror, hunger, and homelessness had made them become ordinary. Very ordinary. They had even stopped being frightening. For a moment, Yara thought they would pass them, would simply cross the road and disappear into the forest on the other side, not gracing the wagon or its passengers with even a glance. That all that would remain of them would be that utterly non-elven, unpleasant, foul smell. A smell that Yara knew only too well from the field hospitals. The smell of misery, urine, dirt, and festering wounds. They passed them without looking. But not all of them. An elf woman, with long dark hair, caked together with congealed blood, stopped her horse right beside the wagon. She sat in the saddle, leaning over awkwardly, protecting an arm in a blood-soaked sling around which flies buzzed and swarmed.
Teruviel,
said one of the elves, turning around.
Inka digne lunes.
Lucienne instantly realized, understood what it was about. She understood what the elf woman was looking at. The peasant girl had been familiar from childhood with the blue-grey swollen spectre, the apparition of famine, lurking around the corner of her cottage. So she reacted instinctively and unerringly. She held out the bread towards the elf woman.
Inka digna, Teruviel,
repeated the elf. He was the only one of the entire commando unit to have the silver lightning bolts of the Vriheth Brigade on the torn sleeve of his dust-covered jacket. The invalids on the wagon, until then petrified and frozen in their tracks, suddenly twitched, as though animated by a magic spell. Quarter loaves of bread, rounds of cheese, pieces of fatback and sausage appeared, as if by magic, in the hands that they held out towards the elves. And for the first time in 1,000 years, elves were holding their hands out towards humans. And Lucienne and Yara were the first people to see elves crying. To see them choking on their sobs, not even trying to wipe away the tears flowing down their dirty faces, giving the lie to the claim that elves supposedly had no lacrimal glands at all.
Inka digne,
repeated the elf with the lightning bolts on his sleeve in a faltering voice. And then he held out a hand and took the bread from Corncrake.
Thank you,
he said hoarsely, struggling to adapt his lips and tongue to the foreign language.
Thank you, human.
After some time, noticing that it had all gone, Lucienne clicked her tongue at the horses and flicked the reins. The wagon creaked and rattled. No one spoke. It was well on towards evening when the highway began to teem with armoured horsemen. They were commanded by a woman with completely white, close-cropped hair, with an evil, fierce face disfigured by scars, one of which crossed her cheek from her temple to the corner of her mouth,
and another of which, describing a horseshoe, encircled her eye socket. The woman also lacked a large part of her right ear, and her left arm below the elbow ended in a leather sleeve and a brass hook to which her reins were attached. The woman, staring malevolently at them with a glare full of vindictiveness, asked about the elves, about the Scoia'tael, about terrorists, about fugitives, survivors of a commando unit destroyed 2 days back. Yara, Lucienne, and the invalids, avoiding the gaze of the white-haired, one-armed woman, spoke, mumbling indistinctly that, no, they hadn't encountered anyone or seen anyone. "You're lying," thought White Rayla, once Black Rayla. "You're lying. I know you are. You're lying out of pity. But it doesn't matter anyway, for I, White Rayla, have no pity."
Hurrah! Up with the dwarves! Long live Berkeley Elves! Long live the dwarves!
The Novigrad streets thudded beneath the heavy iron-shod boots of the old campaigners of the volunteer regiment. The dwarves marched in a formation typical for them, in fives, and the hammers on their standard fluttered over the column.
Long live Mahakam! Vivant the dwarves! Glory to them and fame!
Suddenly, someone in the crowd laughed. Several others joined in, and a moment later, everybody was roaring with laughter.
"It's an insult!"
Hierarch Hemmelfart gasped for air.
"It's a scandal! It's unpardonable!"
"Vile people," hissed Priest Vilimer. "Pretend you can't see it," Foltest advised calmly.
"We shouldn't have economized on their pay,"
Maeve said sourly, "or refused them rations." The dwarven officers kept their countenance and form, standing erect and saluting in front of the review stand, whereas the non-commissioned officers and soldiers of the volunteer regiment expressed their disapproval of the budget cuts applied by the kings and the hierarch. Some crooked their elbows as they passed the stand, while others demonstrated their other favourite gesture, a fist with the middle finger stuck stiffly upwards. In academic circles, that gesture bore the name digitus infamis. The plebs had a cruder name for it. The blushes on the faces of the kings and the hierarch demonstrated that they knew both names.
"We ought not to have insulted them by our miserliness," Maeve repeated. "They're an ambitious nation."
The howler in Elskadeg howled. The howling turned into a horrifying wailing call. None of the men sitting by the campfire turned his head around. Boreas Munn was the first to speak after a long silence.
"The world has changed. Justice has been done." "Well, you might be exaggerating with that justice."
The pilgrim smiled slightly.
"I would agree, though, that the world has in some way adapted itself to the basic law of physics." "I wonder if we have the same law in mind," the elf said in a slow, drawling voice.
"Every action causes a reaction," said the pilgrim. The elf snorted, but it was quite a friendly snort.
"That's a point for you, human."
"Stefan Skelen, son of Bertram Skelen, you, who were imperial coroner, be upstanding. The High Tribunal of the Eternal Empire, by grace of the Great Sun, has found you guilty of the crimes and illegitimate acts of which you have been charged, namely, treason and participation in a conspiracy intended to bring about a murderous assault on the statutory order of the Empire and also on the person of the Imperial Majesty. Your guilt, Stefan Skelen, has been confirmed and proven, and the tribunal has not found extenuating circumstances. His Royal Imperial Majesty has thus not granted you an imperial pardon. Stefan Skelen, son of Bertram Skelen, you will be taken from the courtroom to the citadel, from where, when the apposite time comes, you will be led out. As a traitor, unworthy of treading the soil of the Empire, you will be placed on a wooden cart, and horses will pull you to Millennium Square on that cart. As a traitor, unworthy of breathing the air of the Empire, you will be hanged by the neck on a gallows, by the hand of an executioner, between heaven and earth, and you will hang until you are dead. Your corpse will be cremated and the ashes tossed to the four winds. O Stefan Skelen, son of Bertram, traitor, I, the head of the highest tribunal of the empire, sentencing you, utter your name for the last time. May it henceforth be forgotten.
It works! It works!
Shouted Professor Oppenhauser, rushing into the dean's office.
It works, gentlemen! Finally! Finally! It functions! It rotates! It works! It works!
Really? Jean Lavoisier, professor of chemistry, called rotten eggs by his students, asked bluntly and quite sceptically. It can't be. And what, out of interest, works?
My perpetual motion machine.
A perpetuum mobile? Edmund Bumbler, venerable zoology lecturer, asked curiously. Indeed? You aren't exaggerating, my dear colleague?
Not in the slightest,
yelled Oppenhauser, and leapt like a goat.
Not a bit. It works. The machine works. I set it in motion, and it works. It runs continuously, without stopping, permanently, forever and ever. It can't be described, colleagues. You must see it. Come to my lab, quickly.
I'm having my breakfast, protested Rotten Eggs. But his protest was lost in the hubbub and general excited commotion. Professors, magisters, and bachelors threw coats and fur coats over their gowns and ran for the exit, led by Oppenhauser, still shouting and gesticulating. Rotten Eggs pointed his digitus infamus at them and returned to his roll and forcemeat. The small group of scholars, constantly being joined by more scholars, greedy to see the fruits of Oppenhauser's 30 years of labours, briskly covered the distance separating them from the laboratory of the famous physicist. They were just about to open the door when the ground suddenly shook, perceptibly, powerfully, actually, very powerfully, actually. It was a seismic wave, one of the series of earthquakes caused by the destruction of Stigger Castle, Vilgefortz's hideout, by the sorceresses. The seismic wave had come all the way to Oxenfurt from distant Ebbing. Dozens of pieces of glass exploded with a crash from the stained glass window on the frontage of the Department of Fine Arts. The bust of Nicodemus de Boot, the Academy's first rector, scrawled over with rude words, fell from its plinth. The cup of herb tea with which Rotten Eggs was washing down his roll and forcemeat fell from the table. A first-year physics student, Albert Salpietra, fell from a plantain tree in the Academy grounds that he had climbed to impress some female medical students. And Professor Oppenhauser's perpetuum mobile, his legendary perpetual motion engine, turned over once more and stopped. Forever. And it was never possible to start it again.
Long live the dwarves! Long live Mahakam!
What kind of mixed bunch is this? What gang of ruffians?
Thought Hierarch Hemmelfart, blessing the parade with a trembling hand.
Who's being cheered here? Venal condottieri? Obscene dwarfs? What a bizarre bunch! Who won this war, after all? Them or us? By the gods, I must draw the king's attention to this. When historians and writers get down to their work, their scribblings ought to be censored. Mercenaries, witches, hired brigands, non-humans, and all other suspicious elements are to vanish from the chronicles of humanity, are to be deleted, expunged. Not a word about them, not a word. And not a word about him either, he thought, pursing his lips and looking at Dijkstra, who was observing the parade with a distinctly bored expression. It will be necessary, thought the hierarch, to issue the kings with instructions regarding Dijkstra. His presence is an insult to decent people. He's a heathen and a scoundrel. May he disappear without trace, and may he be forgotten.
Over my dead body, you sanctimonious purple hog, thought Philippa Eilhart, effortlessly reading the hierarch's feverish thoughts. You'd like to rule. You'd like to dictate and influence. You'd like to decide things. over my dead body. All you can make judgments about are your piles, which don't count for much beyond your own arse. And Dijkstra will remain, as long as I need him. You'll make a mistake one day, thought Priest Villimer, looking at Philippa's shining crimson lips. One day one of you will make a mistake. Your vainglory, arrogance, and hubris will be your undoing, and your scheming, your immorality, the baseness and perversion which you give yourselves unto in which you live. It will come to light. The stench of your sins will spread when you make a mistake. Such a moment has to come. And even if you don't make a mistake, an opportunity will arise to blame you for something. Some misfortune, some disaster, some pestilence, perhaps a plague or an epidemic will fall on humanity. Then your guilt will descend on you. You will not be blamed for having been unable to prevent the plague, but for being unable to remove its effects. You shall be to blame for everything. And then fires will be lit under stakes. The stripy old tomcat, called Ginger because of its colouring, was dying. Dying hideously. He was rolling around, writhing, scratching the ground, vomiting blood and mucus, racked by convulsions. On top of that, he had bloody diarrhea. He was meowing, although it was beneath his dignity. Meowing mournfully, softly. He was weakening fast. Ginger knew why he was dying, or at least guessed what was killing him. Several days before, a strange freighter, an old and very dirty hulk, a neglected tub, almost a wreck, had called at the port of Sintra. Katrina, announced the barely visible letters on the hulk's prow. Ginger naturally couldn't read the letters. A rat climbed down the mooring line to alight on the quay from the strange old tub. A single rat. The rat was hairless, lousy and sluggish, and only had one ear. Ginger killed the rat. He was hungry, but instinct prevented him from eating the hideous creature. However, several fleas, big, shiny fleas, teeming in the rodent's fur, managed to crawl onto Ginger and settle in his coat. "What's up with that sodding cat?" "Someone probably poisoned it, or put a spell on it." "Ugh, abomination. It doesn't half stink, the scoundrel. Get him off those steps, woman." Ginger stiffened and silently opened his bloody maw. He no longer felt the kicks or pokes of the broom with which the housewife was now thanking him for 11 years of catching mice. Kicked out of the yard, he was dying in a gutter, frothing with soapsuds and urine. He died, wishing that those ungrateful people would also fall ill and suffer like him. His wishes were about to come true, and on a great scale. A great scale indeed. The woman who had kicked and swept Ginger from the yard stopped, lifted her frock and scratched her calf below the knee. It was itchy. A flea had bitten her. The stars over Elskadeg twinkled intensively. They formed the backdrop against which the sparks from the campfire were dying out.
"Neither can the peace of Sintra," said the elf, "nor yet the bombastic Novigradian parade be considered a watershed or a milestone. What kind of notions are they? Political authority cannot create history with the help of acts or decrees. Neither can political authority assess history, give grades or characterize it, although in its pride no authority would ever acknowledge that truth. One of the more extreme signs of your human arrogance is so-called historiography, the attempts to give opinions and pass sentences about what you call ancient history. It's typical for you people and results from the fact that nature gave you an ephemeral, insectile, ant-like life and an average lifespan of less than 100 years. You, however, try to adapt the world to that insectile existence. And meanwhile, history is a process that occurs ceaselessly and never ends. It's impossible to separate history into episodes from here to there, from here to there, from date to date. You can't define history, nor change it with a royal address, even if you've won a war.
I won't enter into a philosophical dispute, said the pilgrim. As it's been said before, I'm a simple and not very eloquent fellow, but I dare observe two things. Firstly, a lifespan as short as insects protects us, people, from decadence, and inclines us to respect life, live intensively and creatively, in order to make the most of every moment of life and enjoy it. I speak and think like a man, but after all, the long-lived elves thought likewise, going to fight and die in the Scoia'tael commando units. If I'm wrong, please correct me. The pilgrim waited a suitable length of time, but no one corrected him. Secondly, he continued, it seems to me that political authority, although unable to change history, may by its actions produce quite a fair illusion and appearance of such an ability. Political power has methods and instruments to do so.
Oh, yes, replied the elf, turning his face away. Here you've hit the nail on the head, Master Pilgrim. Power has methods and instruments, which are in no way open to discussion.
The galley's side struck the seaweed and shell-covered piles. Mooring ropes were thrown. Shouts, curses, and commands resounded. Seagulls shrieked as they scavenged for the refuse floating in the port's dirty green water. The quayside was teeming with people, mainly uniformed. "End of the voyage, gentlemen elves," said the Nilfgaardian commander of the convoy. "We're in Dillingen. Everybody off, you're being waited for here." It was a fact. They were being waited for. None of the elves, and certainly not Foeltiana, had any faith in the assurances of fair trials or amnesties. The Scoia'tael and the officers of the Vrihed Brigade had no illusory hopes about the fate awaiting them on the far side of the Yaruga. In the majority of cases, they had become accustomed to it, accepted it stoically, with resignation even. Nothing, they thought, could astonish them now. They were mistaken. They were chased from the galley, jingling and clanking their manacles, driven onto the jetty and then onto the quay between a double line of armed mercenaries. There were also civilians there, whose sharp eyes flashed quickly, flitting from face to face, from figure to figure. Selectors, thought Foeltiana. He wasn't mistaken. He couldn't expect, naturally, his disfigured face to be overlooked, and he wasn't. "Mr. Isengrim Foeltiana? The Iron Wolf? What a pleasant surprise! Come this way, come this way." The mercenaries dragged him out of the ranks. "Vafail!" Connacht the Reo shouted to him. He had been recognized and hauled out by other soldiers wearing gorgets with the Redanian eagle. "Seved, Sekirmadia." "You'll be seeing each other," hissed the civilian who had selected Foeltiana, "but probably in hell. They're already waiting for him in Drakenborg. Hello, stop. Isn't that by chance Mr. Reardon? Seize him." In all, they pulled out 3 of them. Just 3. Foeltiana understood and suddenly, to his surprise, began to be afraid. "Vafail!" Angus Bricree shouted to his comrades as he was pulled out of the rank, manacles jingling. "Vafail, Freren!" A mercenary shoved him roughly. They weren't taken far. They only got to one of the sheds close to the harbour, right next to the dock over which a forest of masts swayed. The civilian gave a sign. Foeltiana was pushed against a post under a beam over which a rope was slung. An iron hook was attached to the rope. Reardon and Angus were sat down on 2 stools on the dirt floor. "Mr. Reardon, Mr. Bricree," said the civilian coldly, "you have been given an amnesty. The court decided to show mercy. But justice must be done," he added, not waiting for a reaction. "And the families of those whom you murdered have paid for it to happen, gentlemen. The verdict has been reached." Reardon and Angus didn't even manage to cry out. Nooses were thrown over their necks. They were throttled, knocked down along with the stools, and dragged across the floor. As they vainly tried with their manacled hands to tear off the nooses, biting into their necks, the executioners kneeled on their chests. Knives flashed and fell, blood spurted. Now, even the nooses were unable to stifle their screams, their hair-raising shrieks. It lasted a long time, as always. "Your sentence, Mr. Foyle-Tiana, was equipped with an additional clause," said the civilian, turning his head slowly. "Something extra." Foyle-Tiana had no intention of waiting for that something extra. The manacle's clasp, which the elf had been working on for 2 days and nights, now fell from his wrist as though tapped by a magic wand. With a terrible blow of the heavy chain, he knocked down both mercenaries guarding him. Foyle-Tiana, in full flight, kicked the next one in the face, lashed the civilian with the manacles, hurled himself straight at the cobweb-covered window of the shed, and flew through it, taking the frame and casing with him, leaving blood and shreds of clothing on the nails. He landed on the planks of the jetty with a thud. He turned, tumbled forward, rolled over, and dived into the water between the fishing boats and launches. The heavy chain, still attached to his right wrist, was dragging him down to the bottom. Foyle-Tiana fought. He fought with all his strength for his life, which not so long before he hadn't thought he cared about. "Catch him!" yelled the mercenaries, rushing from the shed. "Catch him! Kill him!" "Over there!" yelled others, running up along the jetty. "There! He came up there! To the bolts!" "Shoot!" roared the civilian, trying with both hands to stop the blood gushing from his eye socket. "Kill him!" The strings of crossbows twanged. Seagulls flew up shrieking. The dirty green water between the launches seethed with crossbow bolts. "Vivant!" The parade stretched out, and the crowd of Novigradians were now displaying signs of fatigue and hoarseness. "Vivant! Long live the army! Hurrah! Glory to the kings! Glory!" Philippa Eilhart looked around to see that no one was listening, then leaned over towards Dijkstra. "What do you want to talk to me about?" The spy also looked around. "About the assassination of King Visimir, carried out last July." "I beg your pardon?" "The half-elf who committed that murder," Dijkstra lowered his voice even more, "was by no means a madman, Phil, and wasn't acting alone." "What are you saying?" "Hush!" Dijkstra smiled. "Hush, Phil. Don't call me Phil." "Do you have any proof?" "What kind? Where did you get it?" "You'd be surprised, Phil, if I told you where. When can I expect an audience, honourable lady?" Philippa Eilhart's eyes were like 2 black, bottomless lakes. "Soon, Dijkstra." The bells tolled. The crowd cheered hoarsely. The army paraded. Petals covered the Novigradian cobbles like snow. "Are you still writing?" Ori Ruvin started and made a blot. He had served Dijkstra for 19 years, but was still not accustomed to the noiseless movements of his boss, appearing from God knows where and God knows how. "Good evening. You're on Men from the Shadows." Dijkstra read the title page of the manuscript, which he had picked up unceremoniously from the table. "The History of the Royal Secret Services, written by Oribasius Gianfranco Paolo Reuven, Magister." Ori, an old fellow, and such foolishness." "I came to say goodbye, Ori." Reuven looked at him in surprise. "You see, my loyal comrade," continued the spy, without waiting for his secretary to cough anything up, "I'm also old, and it turns out I'm also foolish. I said one word to one person, and just one word. It was one word too many, and one person too many. Listen carefully, Ori. Can you hear them?" Ori Reuven shook his head, his eyes wide open in amazement. Dijkstra said nothing for a time. "You can't hear," he said after a moment, "but I can hear them. In all the corridors. Rats are running through the city of Tretogor. They're coming here. They're coming on soft little rats' paws. They came out of the shadows, out of the darkness, dressed in black, masked as nimble as rats. The sentries and bodyguards from the antechambers dropped without moaning under the quick thrusts of daggers with narrow angular blades. Blood flowed over the floors of Tretogor Castle, spilled over the tiles, stained the woodblocks, soaked into the Vengerbergian carpets. They approached along all the corridors and left corpses behind them. "He's there," said one of them, pointing. The scarf shrouding his face up to his eyes muffled his voice. "He went in there, through the chancery, where Reuven, that coffin old coot, works. There's no way out of there." The eyes of the other one, the commander, shone in the slits of his black velvet mask. "The chamber behind the chancery is windowless. There's no way out." "All of the other corridors are covered. All the doors and windows. He can't escape. He's trapped." "Forward." The door gave way to kicks. Daggers flashed. "Death! Death to the bloody killer!" Him? Ori Reuven raised his myopic, watery eyes above the papers. "Yes? How can I help you, gentlemen?" The murderers smashed open the door to Dijkstra's private chambers, scurried around them like rats, searching through all the nooks and crannies. Tapestries, paintings, and panels were torn from the walls, fell onto the floor. Daggers slashed curtains and upholsteries. "He's not here!" yelled one of them, rushing into the chancery. "He's not here!" "Where is he?" rasped the gang leader, leaning over Ori, staring at him through the slits in his black mask. "Where is that bloodthirsty dog?" "He's not here," Ori Reuven replied calmly. "You can see for yourself." "Where is he? Talk! Where's Dijkstra?" "Am I?" coughed Ori. "My brother's keeper." "Die, old man." "I'm old, sick, and very weary. I fear neither you nor your knives." The murderers ran from the chamber. They vanished as quickly as they had appeared. They didn't kill Ori Reuven. They were paid killers, and there hadn't been the slightest mention of Ori Reuven in their orders. Oribasius Gianfranco Paolo Reuven, master at law, spent 6 years in various prisons, constantly interrogated by various investigators, asked about all sorts of apparently senseless things and matters. He was released after 6 years. He was very ill by then. Scurvy had taken away all his teeth, anemia his hair, glaucoma his eyesight, and asthma his breath. The fingers of both hands had been broken during the interrogations. He lived for less than a year after being freed. He died in a temple poorhouse, in misery, forgotten. The manuscript of the book Men from the Shadows, the history of the Royal Secret Services, vanished without trace. The sky in the east brightened. A pale glow appeared above the hills, the harbinger of the dawn. Silence had reigned by the campfire for a long time. The pilgrim, the elf, and the tracker looked into the dying fire in silence. Silence reigned in Elskadeg. The howling phantom had gone away, bored by its vain howling. The phantom must have finally understood that the 3 men sitting by the campfire had seen too many atrocities lately to worry about any old spectre. "If we are to travel together, we must abandon mistrust," Boreas Munn said suddenly, looking into the campfire's ruby glow. "Let's leave behind us what was. The world has changed. There's a new life in front of us. Something has ended. Something is beginning. Ahead of us." He broke off and coughed. He was not accustomed to speeches like that, was afraid of looking ridiculous. But his accidental companions weren't laughing. Why, Boreas positively sensed friendliness emanating from them. "The pass of Elskadeg is ahead of us," he ended in a more confident voice. "And beyond the pass, Serikania and Hackland. There's a long and dangerous road ahead of us. If we are to travel together, let's abandon mistrust. I am Boreas Munn." The pilgrim in the wide-brimmed hat stood up, straightening his great frame, and shook the hand being held out towards him. The elf also stood up, his horrifyingly disfigured face contorted strangely. After shaking the tracker's hand, the pilgrim and the elf held out their right hands towards each other.
"The world has changed," said the pilgrim. "Something has ended. I am Sigiruven."
"Something is beginning."
The elf twisted his ravaged face into something that, according to all evidence, was a smile.
"I am Wolf Isengrim."
They shook hands, quickly, firmly, downright violently. For a moment, it looked more like the preliminaries to a fight than a gesture of reconciliation, but only for a moment. The log in the campfire shot out sparks, celebrating the event with a joyful firework.
"God strike me down," Boreas Munn smiled broadly, "if this isn't the start of a beautiful friendship."
Along with the other martyr sisters, St. Philippa was also calumniated for betraying the kingdom, for fomenting tumults and sedition, for inciting the people and plotting an insurrection. Vilmerius, a heretic and cultist and self-appointed high priest, ordered the saint to be seized, thrown into a dark and foul prison beset with cold and stench, calling on her to confess her sins and declare those that she had committed. And Vilmerius showed St. Philippa divers instruments of torture and menaced her greatly. But the saint merely spat in his countenance and accused him of sodomy. The heretic ordered her stripped of her raiment and thrashed mercilessly with leather straps and for splinters to be driven under her fingernails. And then he asked and called on her to disavow her faith and the goddess. But the saint merely laughed and advised him to distance himself. Then he ordered her dragged to the torture chamber, and her whole body to be harrowed with iron gaffs and hooks, and her sides scorched with candles. And although thus tormented, the saint in her mortal corpse showed immortal forbearance, until the torturers were enfeebled and withdrew in great horror. But Vilmerius fiercely admonished them, and ordered them further to torture her and soundly belabour her. They then began to scorch St. Philippa with red-hot irons, dislocate her members from the joints, and rend the woman's breast with pincers. And in this suffering, she, having confessed nothing, expired. And the godless, shameless Vilmerius, about whom you may read in the works of the Holy Fathers, met such a punishment that lice and worms spread over him and overcame him until he was decayed all over and expired. And he reeked like a cur such that he needs must be cast into a river without burial. For which praise and a martyr's crown are due to St. Philippa, and glory forever to the great Mother Goddess, and to us a lesson and a warning. Amen. The life of St. Philippa the Martyr of Mons Calvus, copied from the Martyr Scribes in the Rhetorian Breviary, summarized, drawn from many Holy Fathers who praise her in their writings.